The sun rose over Crosshill like a quiet promise, casting golden streaks of light across the hills and trees outside Emma's window. Birds chirped in that annoyingly cheerful way that only morning birds seemed capable of. She rolled over with a groan, burying her face in the pillow. She hadn't slept much again, but for once the restlessness wasn't from anxiety or emptiness. It was something else, something unfamiliar. Hope, curiosity, irritation, maybe all three. She sat up, her hair a mess, the unfamiliar weight of the silence settling around her like a thick sweater she wasn't sure she wanted to wear. No blaring alarms, no endless pings from her phone, no chaos, just space. Space to breathe, space to think. And that was terrifying. She got dressed. Simple jeans, a sweater, no makeup. It felt strange being so undone in front of strangers, but then again, wasn't that part of the point? She'd come here, however reluctantly, to be undone. Margaret had left a note on the kitchen table. "Luke's coming by at 9 to help with the porch. You mentioned the railing was loose. He's handy. Let him do his thing. Coffee's fresh." Mem. Emma frowned at the note. She did not remember mentioning the porch railing. She hadn't even noticed it. But apparently Margaret had decided she needed help, and apparently that help came in the form of Luke. Great. She poured herself a mug of coffee and stood at the window, watching as a truck pulled up the gravel driveway. It was old but clean, clearly well used. Luke stepped out, toolbox in hand, wearing the same easy confidence and worn flannel shirt from last night. He caught her watching and tipped an invisible hat with a grin. She rolled her eyes and turned away before he could see her smile. A knock came at the door a few seconds later. "Morning," he said when she opened it. "You sleep okay?" "Define okay," she replied dryly, stepping aside. Luke laughed and walked past her onto the porch, inspecting the railing like he'd built the house himself. "Loose bolts, easy fix. I'll be out of your hair in an hour." Emma leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "So, what are you, the town handyman?" "Something like that," he said, crouching down to pull out tools. "Used to be a contractor, built a lot of homes, then I built a lot of bad habits." That caught her off guard. She raised an eyebrow. "And now?" He glanced up at her. "Now I let Jesus do the building. I just follow." Emma gave a tight-lipped smile, unsure how to respond. "You're not one of those every conversation turns into a sermon types, are you?" Luke grinned. "Only if the Holy Spirit tells me to be. Otherwise, I try to keep it human." That made her laugh, despite herself. He worked quietly, the sound of his tools tapping and tightening filling the crisp morning air. Emma sat on the top step of the porch, coffee in hand, watching him. There was something soothing about the way he moved, deliberate, unhurried, like someone who had nothing to prove. She couldn't remember the last time she'd been around someone like that. "So," he said without looking up, "what brought you to Crosshill?" Emma sipped her coffee. "Burnout. Work? Life," he nodded. "I've been there." "I doubt that." Luke chuckled. "You'd be surprised." Emma hesitated. "Margaret said something last night about people coming here to heal." "They do. You think that's what I need?" He set down the wrench and looked at her. "I think you're here for a reason, and I think Jesus knows exactly what that reason is, even if you don't." There was no judgment in his voice, just quiet confidence, and for some reason that unnerved her more than anything. She stood up abruptly. "Well, I'll let you finish. Thanks for the help." He nodded, not offended. "Anytime." Later that afternoon, Emma wandered into the town square. Crosshill was quaint, like something out of a Christmas movie. A general store, a bakery, a coffee shop with actual hand-painted signs, kids riding bikes, people waving at strangers like it was normal. She hated how much she liked it. "Emma!" a voice called. It was Margaret stepping out of the bakery with a bag of warm scones. "Walk with me?" Emma nodded reluctantly. Margaret handed her a scone. It smelled like cinnamon and something she couldn't name but immediately loved. "I saw Luke fixed your porch." Emma nodded. "He did." Margaret gave her a knowing smile. "He's good with broken things." Emma didn't respond. They walked in silence for a few minutes. "You know," Margaret said finally, "a lot of people come here thinking rest means isolation. But real rest, the kind Jesus gives, it comes through community, through connection, through letting someone in." Emma looked at her sideways. "This is where you suggest I open my heart to God?" Margaret chuckled. "I'm not suggesting, I'm inviting. Big difference." Emma sighed. "I'm not ready for faith, Margaret. I'm barely surviving." "Maybe that's where faith begins," Margaret said softly. "At the end of ourselves." That night, Emma couldn't sleep again. She sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea and staring at the stars. She hated how quiet it was. But more than that, she hated how much she wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than what she'd known. A light came from down the hill. Luke's cottage. She found herself watching it, wondering what kind of life he'd had before this, wondering what it meant to rebuild your life on something stronger than ambition and self-reliance. She didn't want to feel anything, not for Luke, not for God, but for the first time in years, something inside her was stirring, and she didn't know how to stop it. The next morning, she woke to a knock on her door. Luke stood there again, this time with a paintbrush and a bucket of white paint. "I fixed the railing," he said, "but the wood's exposed. It needs sealing before the rain comes tomorrow." Emma stared at him. "Let me guess. Margaret sent you?" "Nope," he said. "This one's on me." She opened the door wider. "Fine, but only if I get to help." He grinned. "Deal." They spent the morning painting the porch railings in companionable silence, occasionally exchanging stories about childhood, hometowns, and favorite movies. Emma found herself laughing more than she had in months. At one point, she looked over at him and asked, "What's your story, Luke?" He paused, brush midair. "Addiction, anger, pride. Lost a lot, almost lost everything. Then Jesus found me, gave me back my life." Emma was quiet. "How does that even happen?" Luke looked her straight in the eye. "You surrender," she swallowed. "That easy?" He smiled sadly. "It's the hardest easy thing you'll ever do." They finished the railing just as clouds began to roll in. "You've got good instincts," Luke said, admiring the finished work. "I used to think I had good instincts," Emma replied. Then life happened. Luke leaned against the post. "Maybe it wasn't your instincts that failed you. Maybe it was what you were building on." Emma looked at him, a lump forming in her throat. "And what if I don't know how to start over?" "You don't start over," he said. "You start surrendering." That night, as the rain began to fall against the cottage windows, Emma sat in the dark, wrapped in the same blanket, whispering words she hadn't spoken in years. "God, if you're there, I don't know how to do this. I don't even know if I believe. But if you're real, show me." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Inside, a fragile faith was beginning to stir. And in the quiet, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in a long, long time. Not peace, not yet, but possibility. Ghosts and grace. The rain had stopped by morning, but the air still carried the scent of wet earth, and something softer, like the world had been gently washed clean. Emma sat on the porch with a steaming mug of tea, staring out at the mist curling between the trees. She hadn't slept again, but she hadn't cried either. That was new. There was something both comforting and terrifying about the silence of Crosshill. It stripped away the noise she used to hide behind, and the longer she stayed, the more the walls she'd built started to feel like a prison instead of a shield. She didn't want to feel, but she was starting to anyway, especially when it came to Luke. He hadn't come by that morning, and for reasons she didn't understand, that disappointed her. She told herself it was because she was used to his company now. The quiet way he filled a space without demanding anything, the steadiness in his voice, the way he looked at her like he saw something good, something she had long stopped seeing in herself. She shook the thought away. This wasn't about Luke. It wasn't about feelings. She hadn't come here to fall in love. She had come here because she'd fallen apart. After breakfast, Emma walked down the hill to the chapel. It was small, old, with wooden pews and stained glass windows that glowed when the sun hit them just right. She hadn't intended to go inside, but her feet carried her there anyway. Margaret was near the front, arranging flowers at the altar. "You're up early," she said with a warm smile. Emma nodded. "I couldn't sleep." Margaret stepped down and dusted her hands on her skirt. "Sleep takes time. Healing takes longer." Emma looked around the chapel. "Did you build this place?" "No, but I've helped keep it standing," Margaret replied. "Like a lot of us here, Crosshill was a sanctuary long before it was a retreat. People came here when they were lost, found more than directions." Emma walked down the aisle slowly, running her hand along the edge of a pew. "Did you ever feel like you were too broken to fix?" Margaret didn't answer right away. "I used to think God only used people who were strong. Turns out he uses the broken ones best." Emma looked at her, voice low. "How?" Margaret walked over to the window, her expression distant. "My husband left me when I was 32, took everything, including our son. I was angry, at him, at God, at myself. I came here thinking I was done, but God wasn't." Emma felt something crack open in her chest. She swallowed hard. "How do you forgive someone who ruined your life?" Margaret turned, her voice oft. You remember the one who forgave you first. Later that day, Emma found herself back at the community center near the chapel. It was buzzing with quiet activity. Residents folding donated clothes, packing meals, writing cards for the sick. Margaret had asked her to help with organizing supplies, and though every part of Emma wanted to say no, she'd said yes. The old version of her would have walked out the door. But that version felt like a ghost now. As she sorted canned goods into boxes, she heard the sound of wood being sawed outside. She stepped to the window and saw him, Luke, working on a broken ramp at the back of the building. Sawdust clung to his shirt. His hands moved with practiced ease, focused and intentional. He caught her watching and smiled. She turned away before he could say anything, cheeks warm. A few minutes later, the door creaked open and Luke stepped in, brushing dust from his sleeves. You organizing the apocalypse? Emma smirked. Just trying not to mess up the system. Apparently, Margaret's got the whole center running on a color-coded chart. She does, Luke said, grabbing a bottle of water. She tried to organize my workshop once. Took me a week to undo it. Emma laughed. I can believe that. They stood in silence for a moment, the tension comfortable, like worn-in jeans. Luke leaned against the wall. How are you holding up? Emma shrugged. Somewhere between overwhelmed and oddly calm. That's progress. Emma looked down. I didn't expect to feel anything here. I thought I'd just check out for a while, rest, and go back to the city. And now? I don't know, she admitted. I'm starting to remember things I've tried to forget, pieces of who I used to be, and it's scary. Luke nodded. Sometimes healing feels like breaking first. She met his eyes. You talk like someone who's been there. I have. Emma hesitated. Would you tell me your story? Luke took a long breath, then nodded. Sure, but not here. They walked along a quiet trail behind the retreat center, the sky beginning to stretch into soft hues of late afternoon. Trees arched above them, their bare winter limbs like a cathedral. Luke's voice was quiet. I grew up not knowing my dad. My mom worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. I started drinking when I was 15. Drugs by 17. Construction gave me a paycheck, but addiction took everything else. Emma listened, her heart aching with each word. I was angry, blamed God, blamed everyone. I hurt people, women, family, myself. I came to Crosshill 6 years ago after I OD'd in a motel bathroom. Emma stopped walking. Luke turned to her, eyes clear and steady. I should have died, but I didn't. A man here, Pastor James, found me, brought me back, not just physically, spiritually. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. And Jesus, Luke nodded. He met me in the middle of my mess. Didn't wait for me to clean up. Didn't shame me. Just loved me. And that love changed everything. Tears filled Emma's eyes, not because of his pain, but because something about his story stirred a longing deep in her soul. A hunger she'd buried for so long, she'd forgotten it was there. I don't know if I can believe that, she whispered. Luke stepped closer, his voice like a balm. You don't have to believe it all today. Just be open. She nodded slowly. I want to, she said. That night, Emma sat on her bed holding her mother's old Bible. She'd found it at the bottom of a box Margaret had asked her to unpack at the community center. She'd stared at it for a long time before slipping it into her bag. Now she ran her fingers over the faded leather cover. Her mother's name was written on the inside, along with a verse underlined in soft ink. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 147, 3. Emma stared at the words until they blurred, and then for the first time in years, she prayed. It wasn't eloquent, it wasn't long, just a whisper, but it was real. God, I don't know what I'm doing, or if you're even listening, but I'm tired. I'm so tired. If you're there, I need you. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, heavy with grace. And in that moment, Emma didn't feel fixed, but she didn't feel alone.